Hi, my name is Elise Finney, and I'm coming to you with another episode of an espresso shot with Argent Bridge Advisors. And today I'm bringing on our guest, Jennifer McCammon, who was she's a partner with Bean Kinney Corman, which is in Arlington, Virginia. They are often one of the speakers for us for Second Saturday. And really wanted to bring her on today to talk about something that probably you never heard even the term until you were going through a divorce, and that's something called a QDRO, which is a qualified domestic relations order. And just wanted to kind of clear up some questions that we've seen come up in some of our webinars that we do and bring it to the expert that can answer those questions for us. So welcome, Jennifer.
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Really just kind of want to start. I mean, obviously I use the words qualified domestic relations order, but kind of just broadly tell us what this is and why would I even need to know what it is?
So a qualified domestic relations order, or a QDRO, really what we call it for short, is an order, usually just a couple of pages, that is used to divide up retirement assets during a divorce. And if you don't have that order, typically what people are used to with retirement funds is if you make a transfer and it's before you are hitting retirement age, you're taxed on any of the funds that you transfer or withdraw. You may be penalized depending on your age, but a QDRO allows us to inform the plan that you're going through a divorce to divide up that asset in a way where funds are transferred from one person's retirement fund into a fund for the other spouse without triggering any sort of taxable event.
Okay, so it's all about avoiding taxes.
It's all about avoiding taxes.
Okay. And do I need to have a QDRO for every single plan that I'm dividing?
That depends on the plan. Most plans will require some court order, a QDRO, in order to do this to avoid taxes. But they're all different, and each plan is going to be different. And typically the plan itself, depending on who the employer is or who is managing the plan, will have their own instructions about how that order needs to be formulated. There is an exception to that, and that is for IRAs. So if you have IRAs as opposed to 401k accounts or 403b accounts, those IRAs may be able to be done without this order. They can usually be done with a form. You don't necessarily have to have a QDRO for every single retirement fund that's being transferred. If you have 5 funds and you take the total of all 5 and come up with an amount that could be transferred from one account as opposed to all 5, that's obviously a lot simpler than having to do 5 different orders with perhaps 5 very different plans. But you want to look at each of those funds and ensure that that makes financial sense to do, because it may be that each of the funds is invested differently. Some may have better return rates. And that's really where a financial planner can also sort of help navigate whether it makes more sense to do it the simple way at the risk of not doing it perfectly versus dividing up each particular fund.
Absolutely. So definitely an opportunity to talk to your financial advisor, kind of see what makes the most sense for you so that, you're getting, the most benefit out of splitting these plans. And then, so is the first step to really go to my plan provider and then ask them, what do I need? And then I take it back to my attorney.
So normally if you're the person who's receiving the funds from a retirement transfer, you're also the one who either you or your lawyer is preparing that QDRO. That means that it is your spouse's retirement plan that's being divided. And so one of the questions you need to ask early on and get documentation for is, who's the plan administrator? What plan statements do you need in order to calculate what your interest is? Get those documents and get any plan materials, including any model QDRO instructions that would allow you to formulate that court order. It's something that happens at the very end of the process because you cannot have a QDRO until you either at the same time that you're divorced or thereafter, soon thereafter. And so often people wait until the tail end of things to address these, but they can take some time. And there's a lot of work going back and forth with these various plans. Sometimes they can be fairly slow to respond. So you may want to early on in the process at least get those documents and identify who the plan administrator is, so you have those orders ready to go whenever you're ready to finalize.
I think that's something I've seen come up in questions, because people want to know what the timeline is. So, here I have the QDRO, and really what's the timeline until I actually have my money?
And that depends largely on the plan. Some plans are very slow to respond and some are not. In fact, sometimes some of the smaller plans may be slower to respond because they don't get these QDROs very often, and it takes a lot of time to go back and forth with them. The other plans that take a very long time is anytime you're dealing with the government. So those orders that may divide up FERS benefits or a thrift savings plan, they're not called QDROs. They have their own name, but they are in essence the same sort of order. They may be called a court order acceptable for processing or a retirement benefits order, but they're in essence the same thing. And anytime you are dealing with OPM or the government to divide up benefits, it may take 6 months before you hear that the order has been processed. I would say that a typical timeline is more like 6 weeks. But just know that depending on the plan and how familiar they are with these and how busy they are, it could take several months before it's finalized.
And I'll just add, it's definitely something you want to stay on top of because, it's your money and you want to get it moved and invested the way you want to. And the more time it's sitting in, essentially someone else's plan is just time that you don't have control over it. So
that's right. And something that I think people don't realize or appreciate either is if you're dividing up the retirement benefits as of the date that you separate from your spouse, which is typical, you still get the investment growth or loss on that fund from the date that you separate until those funds are transferred into an account in your name. And it's important to ensure that that language is in your court order and in any agreement that you have prior to that court order being done. But they're still being invested however your spouse had them invested, and you don't have control over changing the investments to meet your own needs. And so the sooner you can get that done, you're absolutely right, the better. Then you have control over how that money is being managed.
And I think you just brought up a good point because I know that some plan providers have their own kind of, form, but to me, it would make sense that you really want to discuss this with an attorney because there may be specific language that you do want added that might not be in their form.
It's never too soon to have that discussion, even if the retirement transfers typically happen at the end. Understanding how they will be done and what's involved in that, something you ought to know right from the beginning.
Well, good. I think that we cleared up a couple of things and hopefully this was helpful to everybody and really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.